Alright guys, so things are looking downright horrible for Germany. This used to be the beating heart of Europe's economy, the bastion of economic power. But the moment of glory has been lost. The Europeans, especially the Germans, have an energy and technology crisis, and they are behind both. It's very apparent catching up is becoming impossible. The German economy is terribly isolated today. They have decoupled from Russia. The EU have roped them into a tariff war with China, and you don't see the Americans giving Germany any financial aid either. And now we have the unthinkable. Volkswagen, Germany's biggest employer, is forced to restructure. And that means closing at least three auto plants on German soil. Thousands of well paying jobs would be lost in the process. And if you're one of the few lucky ones who are still employed, you won't escape without getting clobbered. Volkswagen told their workers to brace for pay cut of up to 10%. That's a lot. Now they call it a restructuring, but it's going to be more of a culling. The company is flashing profit warnings and sales across the board are plunging. Now the workers in VW, they are rightfully outraged. And we could have bigger strikes across Germany break out if things get nasty enough. Volkswagen has many plants across Germany providing cities and towns with a ton of employment. Volkswagen plans to slash jobs from the core VW brand. Up to 10 plants could be in enormous trouble, from Hanover and Kassel all the way to Wolfsburg. These plants employ thousands of workers. They're responsible for keeping local economies afloat. The grocery stores, the shopping malls, the restaurants, the damage will spread across the communities. Take the city of Emden for example. They produce the VW electric ID4 car. But German EV subsidies are gone, so the need to produce the car is evaporating. Job losses here would decimate Emden. The city has a population of around 50,000 people. Volkswagen employs over 8,000 in the region, and that's almost 20% of the city working for one single employer. This layoff probably isn't the last domino to fall. More pain is coming. Germany is still on the escalation escalator. They have made a lot of geopolitical and economic errors. Instead of backtracking and turning back on Russian gas, they are trying to ban LNG from Moscow. Instead of firing back up the nuclear plants and following what the French are doing, the Germans are on a wild goose chase. They're going to spend billions of dollars of euros chasing hydrogen energy, a technology that's decades away to be feasible. The Germans are going to give nearly $5 billion in subsidies to dozens of hydrogen projects. Instead of focusing on industrial survival, the Germans believe going green is the real priority here. Reducing greenhouse emissions is much more important, and you can't make this stuff up. It's quite unbelievable. It's going to be an expensive distraction the German economy just can't afford. According to the COO of Volkswagen, the company is facing an extreme manufacturing crisis. It's no longer competitive to make stuff on German soil anymore. Some of their German plants were twice as costly to run than those of their rival car makers. Costs for energy, materials, and personnel have continued to rise. This calculation cannot work in the long term. And if we boil this statement down, we can immediately see that labor is expendable. If the Germans can't bring down imported inflation, if all the inputs are too expensive, things get pretty simple here. So more layoffs and more cost cutting might be coming down the road. We must emphasize how serious Germany's energy crisis is. Why is their manufacturing cratering? Why are historic German brands like Volkswagen losing market share? In 2019, German companies were paying around 38 euros per megawatt hour of energy. But in 2024, they are paying much more. The cost of power is nearly 68 euros per megawatt hour. You have a doubling of energy costs, and when the price of energy doubles, it drives every other input up. The cost of shipping increases. The cost of labor also flies up as well. Just food alone will now cost much more. The world of manufacturing is essentially a zero-sum game. When someone loses, someone else in the world wins. China is an obvious example of who benefits, but let's not forget another big winner out there. The US is reaping the rewards of Germany's decoupling with cheap Russian energy. Now, Trump has said many times before that he's opposed to Germany and Europe getting cheap Russian gas.
Sad when Germany makes a massive oil and gas deal with Russia, where you're supposed to be guarding against Russia, and Germany goes out and pays billions and billions of dollars a year to Russia. So we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting all of these countries. And then numerous of the countries go out and make a pipeline deal with Russia where they're paying billions of dollars into the coffers of Russia. So we're supposed to protect you against Russia, but they're paying billions of dollars to Russia, and I think that's very inappropriate. And the former chancellor of Germany is the head of the pipeline company that's supplying the gas. Ultimately, Germany will have almost 70% of their country controlled by Russia with natural gas. So you tell me, is that appropriate? I mean, I've been complaining about this from the time I got in. It should have never been allowed to have happened. But Germany is totally controlled by Russia because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not. And I think it's a very bad thing for NATO, and I don't think it should have happened.
And now that Nord Stream is done, Germany no longer has access to affordable energy. Remember, it's more or less a zero-sum game. The balance of power has now fully swung to America's advantage. If we compare the price of Europe's gas versus the US, the winner is very clear. US prices are over 3 times cheaper than the EU. However, the situation was very different in the past. During the Nord Stream era, before 2020, Europe's prices were on par with the Americans, and that's why companies like Volkswagen could outcompete US brands like Ford and GM. But now the situation has flipped. Thanks to big subsidies and lower manufacturing costs, German companies are actually moving all the way to the US. In 2023, industry giants in Germany began shifting production to America. Volkswagen, for example, is building a $2 billion plant in South Carolina. This is good for American workers. 4,000 new jobs will be created. More tax dollars will also flow to the US government. The same goes for Mercedes-Benz, which is building a huge battery plant in the United States. That's going to create thousands of jobs as well. The longer this situation drags out, the US will continue to pull investments away from Germany's domestic economy. And because of this, Germany is stuck. In 2025, the US could start imposing tariffs on the world. And that's going to include German exports as well. This is going to bury German industries even more. One could say that the only way to survive is to perhaps pivot to Asia. Instead of relying on the US consumer market, why not shift focus to China? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that door is starting to close. German automakers are getting squeezed in the Chinese market. Volkswagen has admitted that to survive in China, the company has to give big discounts on their EVs. Since last year, they have been slashing prices to fight against competitors like BYD and NIO, and even foreign brands like Tesla. And is that going to work long term? And let's be generous and say that it might. Margins are still going to come down. Profits are still going to collapse and affect jobs back in Germany. A margin war in China is no joke, it's brutal. It's essentially the Hunger Games where companies are driven all the way to bankruptcy. Competitors like Tesla and BYD, their number one mission, is to grab more market share. They aren't really focused on profits just yet, but German automakers are, and that's the very big challenge. In the past, we could make the case that German brands like Porsche targets wealthy customers, but even the luxury segment is being targeted by Chinese automakers. In the sports sedan category, Xiaomi is outcompeting with their SU7, and it's 4 times cheaper than the Porsche Taycan. For SUVs, the same thing is happening. The car from Mercedes costs over 2 million yuan. China's Wang Yang is half the price at just 1.1 million, and it looks like the car is actually superior versus the Mercedes-Benz. German automakers might not collapse in China, but they will be struggling for many more years to come. Chinese buyers are looking for both quality and value. That's the key difference now. Consumption in China is still quite weak, so expectations are extremely high for what people buy. Besides cost, there's also another reason why German automakers are in crisis. Their technology is far behind both China and the US. Germany was complacent for far too long. In a Gartner study, German brands are losing to the rest of the world. The top spots belong to either the US or China. Their digital capabilities are better, from EV batteries all the way to voice assistants. The Germans are a mile behind. Tesla, NIO, Xpeng, and Rivian, all these are either American or Chinese brands. The engineering might be solid, but the technology isn't. So Germany has to close the gap. When the EU first imposed tariffs on China, they had a game plan. On the surface, it looks like they are protecting their auto industry, and that is true to a certain extent. They wanted to prevent affordable Chinese EVs from flooding in. But if you look deeper, there's actually a deeper, more insidious agenda for the trade war. According to officials and diplomats, the EU wants to force Chinese automakers to come to Europe, and the plan is simple. For Chinese automakers like BYD and NIO to form joint ventures with EU companies, and this will allow EU brands to learn from Chinese engineers. There will be a technology sharing and exchange between Europe and China. At least that was the plan. However, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. The EU has made a big miscalculation with their tariffs, especially if this is their agenda. China still has the global south as their customers. Demand in Latin America and Asia is exploding. BRICS will be the biggest contributor to global growth as well. And that means China isn't afraid of losing Europe, at least not to the extent the EU thinks they are. The Chinese government can see through these rules. In a big move that actually confirms it, China is asking their car makers to halt EU expansion. Do not build your factories in Europe and share your technology. The EU economy is under pressure and Western demand for EVs might collapse even further. And when China makes a suggestion, it's more like an unofficial directive. You best believe Chinese automakers will take this seriously. Dongfeng Motors is one such company that's stopping expansion into Europe. They're halting plans to manufacture cars in Italy. So it's not just Germany that's in trouble. Italy is facing economic headwinds as well. Europe will have to find other ways to grow their GDP. Remember when we said the EU was pivoting towards a war economy? Well, it's happening. It's crazy, but it's actually happening right now. In a stunning move, Italy is looking to build up their defense sector. They are shifting 4.6 billion euros earmarked for the auto sector to defense. Thanks to the EV tariffs, China isn't going to send investments their way, and Italy is the canary in the coal mine. So in 2025, we could see even more EU countries shifting towards the military industrial complex, and business will be booming. If the Ukraine war continues, EU defense companies will be busy restocking ammunition and equipment. Even if the conflict does stop, there's always the Russian and Chinese boogeyman to worry about. It's really weird, it's really bizarre, but this is the state of the world we are in today. At this point, I have no idea how Europe is going to U-turn this mess around. I really can't find a solution to this dilemma. But let me know what you think. Will Volkswagen shut down even more plants? And is there an escape route for the EU? Is there a plan? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.